Alright, today I'm going to put new covers on the kitchen stools. Now, the ones we got there, the padding is really shot on them and the covers are totally worn out. 2 years ago I told my wife I would recover them and refinish them, but I hadn't gotten around to it. But there you can see there's no cushioning left in them anymore. They're totally destroyed. So first thing I did is I dragged them down in the shop, and I figured in one of those projects I had to do anyway, so I flipped them up and looked at them. I noticed that basically the one I was sitting on was really loose and wobbly and had some major problems to it. So first I had to take care of them before putting the covers on. You can see the glue joint there had kind of dried out, I guess, and fallen apart. And my wife had bought some replacement cushioning and some covers for them 2 years ago, like I said, and I promised to do it, but I just kept putting it off. And I knew this was going to be a problem because it's a 3-inch thick foam. We wanted thicker cushions on them, and I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I got them to come out pretty good, so I'll show you what I did. So first off, these cheap stools are usually held together with just a couple screws up from the bottom to allow you to remove the cushion there. And I did recover these cushions once, probably about 10 years ago. So these stools are quite old, and they also need some painting too. I'm going to sand them down and paint them once the weather clears up. But for now, I just did the cushions. And a couple of those corner bolts that were loose, actually I was able to tighten them up, the top two. So they went pretty good. But I did run into a problem with one of the bottom ones where actually the threads were stripped off the end of the screw stud that was screwed into the leg. So there was no way to tighten it. It was just like a stripped piece of metal there. And I did have some laying around, some old those corner bolts, but I had to pull it out first. So I just used a pair of vice grips here. These are those Armor tool grips. They work pretty good. And I'm just going to unscrew that. And it turned out being a lot longer than I was expecting. It really turned out that the ones that I had were no good. They were made for using steel straps in the corners. But there you can see it stripped off. And there's the little short things I had. So that was a no-go. And finally I did wind up finding in my junk drawer a garage door hanging lag screw that was just the right size for it, so I put that in there instead. You can see that light that I've got. I've been having a lot of trouble with lately, that LED, I think it's GVM light. The switch and the power connection there have been bad, and it just flickers on and off all the time, so I'm going to have to do something with that soon. But anyhow, now to fix that, pull it apart for the get some glue in that joint there. These Bessie clamps, really, they just they come apart and they flip, and you can use them as a spreader too, so that's a real easy thing. And there was no glue left. It looked like it just dried out and cracked away, so I just figured I'm gonna put some glue on everything and push it back together. Oops, pushed too hard and it fell apart. But put some glue on it, put it back together, and hopefully that'll hold it for another, 15 years or so. So I just squeezed quite a bit of glue in there and put some on the end of that tenon there and let it go back in there. And then here you can see, you just push that button and you can flip these around. These are really great clamps. I love them. But trouble is too short. That one was too short for there, so I just had to get out one of the other types to just clamp that for a couple minutes. And then I went back and I put some 1.25-inch pin nails in there from each side, just to for a little safety. You don't see these things, and they do add a little bit of extra strength. So that chair was fixed, and now I'm just going to pull a cushion off the other chair. Actually, this is the chair my wife sat on, and it's in much better condition than the one I used, so that was good. And another thing I'm going to do, usually every year anyway, I do this. I pull the these little pads off the bottom of them because they get little stones and stuff in them, and they'll scratch the floor over time. And usually I just scrape them off, and I'll stick a new set on just to help protect the floors and stuff, make them slide easy. So I did that to both chairs there. You know, it only takes a couple minutes, and you buy those pads by the 100. They're really cheap. Then I decided to pull this apart here. This is the first cushion, and you know, like I said, about 10 years ago, I did replace this fabric on here. And I used those Chinese staples with the Harbor Freight stapler, and they all were breaking off and stuff. And really, I just put hundreds of them in there, so it wasn't fun getting it apart. But the thing is, the material that we did put on there before was a nice thin material that formed to the chair good, and the new stuff is a real heavy material that I'm not sure what's going to happen. So I got the first one apart. It took me 45 minutes to pull it apart, and you can see the cushion's totally shot. It's like what happens to Chinese foam over time. It kind of gets to a powdery state, and it loses its ability to hold the air in it and trap the air and, you know, work as a cushion. Basically, that had a couple pieces of like double-sided tape holding it onto the board. And when I looked at the board, the screw holes for mounting it were pretty much stripped out, and it turned out everything on it was just kind of looked like it was cut by eye, and nothing was actually square or anything. So I decided to heck with it, and I had a piece of plywood laying there. Instead of wasting 45 minutes on the second one, I figured I'm just going to make some new ones that are, you know, that fit right and they're nice and shaped properly to start out with. Now, I didn't have any half-inch plywood. I just had 3/4, so you'll be sitting a 1/4 inch higher, but I don't think that'll matter. So I cut them a little bit bigger than what was there before, too, because they just didn't fit on there right anyway. So I got them, you know, I just set up and I cut the two pieces one after the next, and then had to put some radiuses on the front of it there. So over to this belt sander, and it's one of those tools that I really love and I use all the time. Does a good job, and with a clean belt on it, it really does cut good. So I got that all ready to go, and then I'm just going to go back to the chairs and actually use the angles and stuff on the chairs instead of just hacking them out like they did, and then go over to the bandsaw and cut out the corners here to match. So basically in the end it wound up taking me less than 15 minutes to make the new bottoms compared to what would have taken 45 minutes to take the other one apart. So I got the two of them. I did one after the other. I got it notched out, and then I decided to put a radius around the bottom of it because I'm going to have to stretch this material really tight, and I don't want something that's going to cut over time and cause problems. I got the radius on there, and then I went back and just in the middle of the seats I drilled 2 holes just to let the air out of the cushion when you sit down, and I figured I'll put those same 2 holes in these 2 pieces that I'm making here too, so you don't hear any strange noises when you sit down. And in the end, it turned out being a smart thing to do to make new ones, just because of the amount of force it took to pull down and compress all the layers of fabric. With the other screws being pretty much stripped out, they would have never held. So, this really was worthwhile. And, luckily I had a piece of scrap plywood laying around. So then it comes time to open the cushion up, and this has been sitting in the closet for 2 years. Immediately notice it's made in America, so it's actually American foam. I'm guessing it's going to last longer than the other stuff too. But my biggest fear was this stuff here is 3 inches thick, where the other stuff was 1.5 inches thick that was on there. So I didn't know how I was going to deal with it. And first thing I did is I got out my trusty old Jinsu knives that I got about 20, 30 years ago at the fair. Buy one, get one free, and figured that should cut it, the foam. Well, didn't cut it the way I thought it was gonna. Kind of made a mess out of it, hacked it out, but I did get it cut into 2 pieces, and then I just traced out this outline, and I was trying to figure out how to cut it. And I said, okay, I'm gonna try my bandsaw. I don't know if it'll work or not. It's only got a real coarse blade on it and stuff, but it was the only thing I had that was thick enough to cut it. So I went over to the bandsaw, and I was pretty amazed how nice it cut. I thought it would be tearing chunks out and ripping stuff up. Cut it perfectly. I just couldn't believe it. You see that perfect smooth cuts. And the motor's not straining with this. It's one of the few things that this bandsaw can cut without working hard. So that turned out being a much easier job to get a good clean cut than I thought it was going to be. Never tried this before. Usually you can just cut it with a knife, or I used to have an electric knife that would cut it too, but you really couldn't get a perfect cut like this. So that really made me feel good knowing I could cut it like that. But I still had a little bit of concern about the thickness of it, and that's what's really made me put this project off for so long. So if you ever have to cut foam, this is one way that really worked good for me. So I was able to easily cut the outline of that board that I just traced, and actually pretty accurately too, and nice straight edges. So I was very pleased. And a little bit of trimming with a razor blade, knife blade there to clean up some corners and stuff. Then I had to figure out how to kind of make the fabric pull down around that 3-inch thick foam there. And first thing I did is I cut that piece in half for the 2 cushions, and I immediately noticed this stuff is really thick. It's like at least 3 times the thickness of the stuff that was on there, and it's going to be a lot tougher to deal with. Hoping to get away without having sewn corners on here. So I decided to let's just stick the foam on this new backing piece there with some double-sided tape like they had it. So that stuck down pretty good. Just a couple pieces of the tape there that I use on my CNC router. I got a ton of that stuff laying around. So, and then I cut a strip of plywood. I wanted to put a even taper around the edges to see if I could just I have no way to put a radius on there. I figured a taper I might be able to pull into a radius with the fabric to make it look round on the corner. So figured I'd try this, and I just took a strip and Sharpie and just put a line all the way around it. Then back over to the bandsaw, and I tilted it up. Just kind of I didn't have any tilt the table or anything. I just tilted up on about a 30-degree angle there, and decided to cut all the way around the edges and just put a taper there so that stuff doesn't roll over when I try to squish it down and pull it. Otherwise you'll get like a almost like a wave style on the end of the foam if you try to do it without that. So the bandsaw did a really good job on this too. I'm really surprised how good this thing worked. Kind of a mess down inside the housing of it with all the pieces of foam, but that's easy to vacuum out. So this was, I figured this might help me get the corners and stuff to come out nice. And again, using that 3-inch thick foam here compared to the old 1.5-inch thick, it's like a whole different animal now. So the bandsaw did a good job. Everything got tapered, and next problem was, how do I squish the foam? I thought about clamping it to the bench, but then I'm like, well, the clamps will be in my way. And then I realized you could flip around these straight jaw, parallel jaw clamps here, Bessie clamps, and turn it so that they'll push. And I measured to my ceiling joist up there, and I realized that these clamps, you can see they're just perfect for putting pressure on the foam. So I just put some pressure on one side with one, and then I, tighten one up, and then I tighten the next one up a little bit until I actually got to a point where I liked how it looked like it was compressed. So there you can see I tightened one up and then pull the other one up a little bit more, because you can only move about 2 inches at a time. And I got the front compressed down to about 1 inch. In the back, I got compressed a little, maybe about 1 3/4. Figured I'd taper it a little bit. Next problem is this stuff is so thick, it's going to be hard to make the corners. But got out my Chinese staples and my Harbor Freight staple gun, and I've had this thing for years, and it's kind of junky, no safeties on it or anything, but it does do a good job of putting in the staples when they come out. Sometimes you miss one like that, but most of the times they come out, and it makes it a real easy job. So I just started working on the front edge there, got everything pulled back, stretched out as tight as I could. Well, first I kind of stretched it under the pillow there. And I have to warn you, at this point in time, I had no idea how this was going to come out. But I did notice that this material is just so thick and so heavy that trying to do it without sewn corners really is a kind of a problem to keep it from getting bunched up. But, I was able to stretch it out, and I did the 4 sides. I got them stretched pretty good here. And having that radius on the bottom of the plywood actually helped to be able to pull that nice and even and tight too with it hanging up. And then back over to the last side there and get that staple started on everything. So it's just a matter of trying to just stretch it out and just get the wrinkles and stuff out of it as best I could. And I pretty much got the 4 sides all pulled taut, and thought I put a new blade in my razor blade knife there, and I thought I'd just cut right through it like that, but this stuff really is very tough. It's kind of like a leather look-alike, but it's got a real soft feel to it. But it's a very tough fabric. I found out that razor blade knife wouldn't cut through it first thing. But as you can see, I stole my wife's scissors from her sewing box, her good ones that she never lets me use for anything because she's afraid I'll damage them, and I'm using them now. So, and they do actually cut nice. I was surprised how easy they cut this, having a good sharp pair of scissors. So I just started, at this point in time, I just started going back and trimming enough so I'd have about 2 inches, enough to get under that wood frame on the bottom, stapled in place there. And then I started trying to figure out how to fold and pull the corners. And I wound up doing quite a bit of trimming there to get rid of some of the lumps, because if you just tried to pull it over and fold it, it was like a 1/2 inch thick pile of material there. So, using a thicker material like this did turn into a problem, but I was able to get it pretty good after, staring at it for a while and stretching it and trying to see what would work best. It's actually far from perfect, but I know that she'll never notice it. So I just worked with it best I could, and it trimmed a little bit out here and there, and put a couple extra staples in down there to try to get it so it looked halfway decent. And my whole thing was, at this point, I'm hoping that when I let the foam expand, it's going to pull everything back out and tighten it up. So then I knew there'd be a lot of force on this when I let the pressure off, so I figured I better put a ton of staples in here. So I just went back and I, loaded everything down with staples good just so they won't pop out later. And the same thing, I got all the sides on it stapled good, and just kind of went back and put extra staples in and worked each corner, trimming as I went, trimming a little bit at a time and pulling and trimming. Now the back corners were even a little bit worse because they've got the spot that goes around the upright on the chair there, so that wound up being a little more trimming. But I did get them come out pretty good. I was really surprised. And again, you want to make sure you keep enough there that you're wrapped around when you put staples in, so no frayed edges will show or anything. So it's kind of a fine line between getting rid of all the lumps and having a big pile of material there. So I finally got everything stapled done. I'm like, okay, let's see what happens when we let off the clamps. This was the exciting part to me. I never tried it before, so I didn't put that label on the bottom either, so I'll probably go to jail now. But I flipped it over, and I was really amazed how nice it came out. Everything was nice and tight. The edges did come out round in the end, and the corners are a little bit ugly looking. But I think over time there's enough force on them that it's going to stretch out and they're going to even out. So I'm going to throw this back on the first chair, and it was real good putting the new plywood on because now I can crank these screws down really good and tight. And they actually did compress all that fabric, the piles of fabric in the corners, and pull that all down nice. So in the end it turned out pretty nice, and I'm real happy, and oh man, they are comfortable now. This extra foam really did make a nice comfortable cushion. And like I said, once it warms up, I'll take them outside and I'll take the cushions off and give them a quick coat of spray paint to clean them up. So now that I know that worked on the first cushion, time to go back and cut out the second one. And there you can kind of see side by side that new material is at least 3 times as thick as the old stuff. But, it did work out in the end. And here's the second one all ready to go. And exact same squishing to the exact same measurements and stuff. So, it did work. These clamps did work good. And another 500 staples in the bottom there. So I guess from now on, whenever I do cushions, I'm probably going to, I usually try to just pull them over and stretch them without compressing the cushion at all. And that never comes out perfectly even or anything. You always get pulls in it and stuff. Where here, this really did make a big difference. And I got the exact look I was looking for, and, it did come out nice. And there you can kind of see when I put those screws in, it pulls the those corners right down tight. So that did work out good in the end. And one of them did have a little bit more of a lump in it than the others, but I think over time that's going to go away. And I don't think the wife will even notice it. So yeah, it's really nice to have this bench with all these drawers for putting the tools in that I use all the time. Keep everything where I can find it. I don't spend a lot of time looking for stuff anymore. So that's pretty much it. Another job that I promised to do years ago is finally done. Glad she's patient. Anyhow, I brought them up, and everybody's happy with them, and they did. I think they turned out pretty good for what I had to work with there, and they are extremely comfortable now, which is the biggest part. That's what we were worried about. So I just kind of thought I'd share this, how I did get that to finally squish down and come out fairly nice, and tried them and loved it and said, okay, good job. And a couple hours later, I had 2 loaves of fresh sourdough wheat bread to enjoy. So like I always say, happy wife, happy life. So I just thought I'd share this and, show you it's really not that big a job covering seats like this, but, This looks like this little pre-squishing technique really made it come out better for me for the materials I was using. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.